So Roger, thanks so much for joining us. How are you finding Cannes?
Great, yeah, good so far. Obviously only on day one, but we've had a few good events. We've talked a lot about AI already,
Sure.
which is a hot topic, of course. And the weather's been hot. Obviously, it's just cooled down a little bit now, which is quite good timing. But yeah, it's been a good day so far.
Excellent. So I was just saying earlier, I looking at your kind of LinkedIn profile, and you are one of the most prolific of LinkedIners. But if we go back to your kind of Bradford Grammar School days, a long time ago now, but you chose kind of marketing as a degree course, didn't you, at Lancaster Uni? And one of the things that sort of struck me, and it'd be great to get your some of the highlights of your career, but you've always seemingly been one step ahead of the world of media, and you got into programmatic media early, you got into retail technology early, you got into retail media early. So tell us a little bit about your career thinking, your choices you've made.
Yeah, I guess, going back a long way with the BGS stuff, Bradford Grammar. But yeah, Lancaster was where it started in terms of marketing for me. So I guess, as Mark Ritson would say, you want to get the basics right and have a the right education around that. So I'm lucky to have had that grounding before I got into the industry at large. And then I've always, like you said, tried to make the moves into the spaces where the puck is going, right? So where's the next big thing or big growth area of the industry? And at the time when I started, I moved from broadcast into digital. And agency side kind of started developing out the e-commerce space.
Did you start agency side or did you start brand side?
Yeah, no, I would have counted the first 10 or 15 years of my career agency side. So that was my grounding. And I'd always tell people that was a great place to start because you really get to meet the market. Everyone's coming to you presenting ideas or pitching opportunities, and it's just a great place to learn when you're fresh out of uni, as I was at the time. So that was a good starting point for me, and where the retail media and the e-commerce journey started as well. So we started building out digital shelf analytics solution when I was at MediaCom, and that's something we did for a few big CPG clients like P&G, Revlon, and others. Fonterra over in Australia and New Zealand. So that was where it started, and like you said, I've tried to keep ahead of the game and see where the next big opportunity is. And retail media, obviously, as we both know, has been one of the biggest growth areas for the last decade or so now, and a really, really interesting space. It's a space where almost two industries are coming together, right? You've got retail and the advertising and media marketing, and that build and that coordination that needs to happen across different parties has always been a fascinating space. And obviously more recently into the AI world. So ads in LLMs is obviously a space I'm in now, and that feels like where many industries are going, but retail is going to have its own application of that. So
sure, yeah,
it'll be interesting to see.
We'll come on to that, but before we do, I'd love to hear some of your thoughts on retail media, particularly from, say, the brand's point of view. And you were head of retail media for Diageo, one of the world's biggest consumer brands. How has retail media evolved within Diageo, and how are they thinking about it?
Yeah, I think it was a global role, so I got the chance and was lucky to work across a number of different markets. So we saw, the Americas, the US, the UK, and over into APAC as well. So obviously with alcohol particularly, there's rules and regulations which may mean it is quite different in different markets. So there's a lot of, perhaps less of scaling one thing across all markets and taking the best bits and trying to apply it in different ways to work within the guidelines and the regulations in each market. So I think that was definitely a conscious part of it. I think in terms of retail media, it's always been, we always thought of retail media as media, so it always sat within the marketing department, within the media team. And we saw it as something that you needed that media expertise applied to it, because it is, even at the start you would need that, but especially so these days where it's become much more sophisticated and there's different channels, off-site, on-site, in-store, that all need to be dealt with. And so I think a background in media and marketing is important to be able to bring that expertise, even if you're working closely with, maybe the trade marketing teams or merchandising teams.
I was going to ask that because, spending money with retailers is something that Diageo have always done. So how do they draw the distinction between what's considered commercial spend and what's, if you're saying retail media is a media spend, where's the line drawn?
Well, I think it's about the objectives that you're trying to achieve there, and there's some degree of different timescales as well. So commercial agreements are obviously done probably on a lower frequency than a campaign would be set up and launched. So they're much more longer term and maybe bigger negotiations are done obviously with different parts of the business as well. Those relationships are obviously decades old as well and hundreds of years old in some cases. So they're important and they're done perhaps approached in a different way to a media or marketing campaign where that budget needs to deliver a particular outcome that's a marketing outcome. And that's where retail media has to sort of wash its face and stand up to other channels and deliver those type of outcomes, and therefore needs the expertise.
And what are the outcomes?
Well, sales obviously is a classic one in terms of driving sales, but you might have a new product launch that you're trying to promote. It might be that you're trying to reach a particular audience with a certain product. Obviously, with big brands like Diageo, they have other sponsorships as well, whether it's the Premiership sponsorship or we had the Eurovision with Baileys, for example. So you're trying to support a program that exists as a bigger, more holistic kind of marketing activation as well.
Okay, cool. And you also, along the way, you work for some of the leading retail media ad tech companies like Criteo, CitrusAd, etc. How do you see that particular world?
Yeah, again, it's a kind of a story of sophistication and maturing. We're seeing, some platforms are offering a solution that's an end-to-end solution that offers everything, and then we're getting really specialist point solutions coming in that are really just tackling one particular, challenge or opportunity, and creating something bespoke that then adds value to that overall stack. And I guess that's probably where it's going in terms of technology. It's probably not the case that most people will have one uniform stack for everything. They'll actually have a much more modular approach and use best of breed where they can to deliver, certain solutions.
And then looking at your experience in working with retailers, how would you see the evolution of retail media within the retailers, and give us some thoughts on that?
Yeah, look, I mean, retailers, obviously, we talked about it earlier. The challenge here is that they have a core business which is very different from media, and it's the integration of that together is the journey that they're all going on. Obviously, retail media itself is getting a little bit more complex as we get more channels and newer technology solutions that can offer, that off-site piece obviously is a growing area where we've got retailer data being pushed into many more different media channels. So whether that's connected TV or off-site social. So there is a skill set that needs to be developed there, and we're seeing many retailers now have people that have, very tenured media careers behind them. And I think we're seeing, even just last week we had the Dunnhumby announcement where there's this new network of different retailers coming together. So I think we're definitely seeing some new things come around, despite it being 10 years old and like you would think, in a well-developed place. Yeah,
I mean, there seems to be constant innovation, and I guess with that in mind, you've done another kind of potential Wayne Gretzky, let's go to where the puck is heading rather than where it is, and the world of, I guess, where media intersects with AI or LLMs. Yeah. Can you tell us a little bit about your thinking behind that? Yeah,
I think AI is obviously affecting nearly every industry and like many job functions, and creating efficiencies, creating new opportunities. And I think for retailer it's no different. So we've got people using these LLMs for product discovery, finding solutions, and that might be off a completely different search to start with. It's just a passion point they're exploring, could quite easily turn into a shopping opportunity. And therefore, because of the scale of them and the amount of people that are using them these days, it is now a meaningful opportunity for retail to be interested in and to be building for. I think we're also seeing, obviously, some of the biggest retailers developing out those shopping assistants on their own sites. So that becomes an asset to them on their site. It's fully embedded with all the product catalog, it's reading all the reviews, so it can have a really informed opinion when people are shopping and using these solutions. So I think that in itself is A, useful to the shopper, but B, a really high valuable asset and a moment of intent for shoppers. So if we're talking about retail media, that becomes a very monetizable space. And it might not fully replace a classic search bar today, but it's definitely taking some attention away from other areas of the site that are currently monetized. So yeah, it's interesting to see how it's affecting, and that is only thinking about AI on kind of the retail media and media element of it. Obviously, retailers have a full supply chain and back end of business that can equally be affected by AI. So lots of areas where it's coming in and offering kind of solutions, and we're only in the first innings. Like you said, it's kind of an early space for most companies. We're exploring which are the best partners to work with in this space, like who can offer the different solutions, how can we actually turn it from like a general language model to something that's very specific to retail. And I think that's interesting, right? That's
so. There's clearly been this massive explosion in people using LLMs for search and finding things out. And so you don't need to be a genius to think that getting your brand positioned within those kind of conversations, if that's the right term, is a good thing to do. So how does a brand like Guinness or a retailer like Tesco, how should they be thinking about getting their brand or?
Yeah. So I think obviously we're thinking about where agents are showing up. Yeah, we talked about the more general purpose LLMs like ChatGPT, Claude, Gemini. Obviously there's shopping behavior happening there. So there's two parts of that. You've got the organic side of things where you need to show up organically, and there's new disciplines of SEO kind of evolving into generative engine optimization or answer engine optimization. And that's a whole new space where there's a whole cottage industry now of tools that can help you track that, but also agencies and partners that can help you kind of surface in those environments. So that's the organic side, and that's always been the first mover. And I guess the second part is the ad side. So how can you then pay to play in some of those environments and take advantage of that really high intent, high context kind of conversation that's happening? And I guess that's where we play now in my current role, is to turn those opportunities into paid opportunities and have brands show up, and retailers actually show up in those environments.
So tell us about Thrad then. What is the sort of the founding vision of Thrad?
Yeah, so we're here to really unlock the power and the opportunity in those conversations. So we play on both sides of that equation. We have integrations directly into chatbots and LLM type interfaces, whether that's broad multi-purpose chatbots like ChatGPT, but other ones, or verticalized ones, which could be retailers as an example. So we can integrate into that. We're obviously looking at that full context of the conversation. So that might be a multi-turn conversation of a question, answer, and refinement. And then it's about serving an ad that's relevant to that environment. So it can get, obviously when you're thinking about a Google search, it's a couple of keywords. When you're talking about a full conversation, there's so much more context, so much more intent being shown there, that it can be quite a powerful environment to show up as a retailer or brand, and that's what we help them do. And then if you're an advertiser or an agency, we have the platform where you can log in and buy that activity. So you can set up your campaigns and start running them now. Really interesting space, and obviously we're trying to help unlock that as a new opportunity. And I guess maybe if we get a bit more specific for retailers, there's probably a few ways they can look at this. They could look at it purely as an advertiser themselves. Yeah. They want to show up and advertise against certain key topics that are relevant to their category. It could be an off-site retail media play. So retailer and a brand combining. So then maybe the brand's funding it. We're using the retailer's account and driving them through to the retailer. And then the third one is if they have that asset on their site, they have a conversational assistant of their own, then we can help them monetize that as well. So they're probably the three avenues from a retailer to think about.
Got it. So I guess in like kind of traditional offsite, even though that whole area is evolving very, very quickly, the retailer's leveraging its first-party data into, say, a social media platform or so on. Is it essentially the same principles driving, doing the same thing into LLMs?
It is, but I guess LLMs, it's almost, you've got that extra element of really high context of the conversation that's happening. So it's not just you're pushing data into another environment and just hoping to find that cut shopper again. It's actually in a moment when it's combining the best of search, if you like, of people, contributing what they're looking for themselves into the platform, and then combining that with the ability to target through a retailer's account. So, yeah.
So a retailer who's able to fulfill to the demand that is being described or discovered,
Yeah.
how would you advise them to go about doing that?
Yeah, so well, obviously speak to us if they have any questions, and we can certainly have a conversation about it. Would love to help on that. But I guess it's thinking about the conversations and the questions that their products are the answer to. That's in the simplest terms. It's like what kind of conversations are people? So if we think about a drinks company, it's like when they're looking for cocktail recipe ideas, they're looking for, oh, I've got this bottle of X. What other things can I make with this? Then that's a perfect timing, right? That's perfect intent to show up as a brand and say, well, we can offer a product that addresses that. So yeah, depending on the category, obviously some of these conversations happen over many months and years, and some are quite short term and quite immediate. The other thing to think about with LLMs as well is it is really full funnel, because you can have really non-commercial conversations right at the top when you're just investigating a topic, thinking about something in particular. Maybe you're just looking for a new house or new area. You're not even thinking about a home loan yet, but you're at that top of the funnel thinking about, okay, where am I looking to start with? But you know that as people move down that funnel, and even making a proactive suggestion of saying, well, we have a home loan offer for you at the bottom of that funnel, is a good place to be, approaching that customer. So yeah, it's not, I don't think you should always think about it as like really just bottom of the funnel performance, which has always been one of the problems for retail media, right? That it's been a space where people assume it's that type of campaign always. Actually, there's many other use cases and different conversations to have.
Yeah, fascinating listening to that, and it's got me thinking. If you're a startup, which essentially, your company's only be going a few years, is it, or months?
Well,
even?
almost less than a year. Probably fully started at the start of this year. Before that, there was some obviously early testing and some early campaigns running as betas, but really only full scale this year. And in line with ChatGPT, right? They've only launched a self-serve platform in the last couple of months, so it's definitely a fresh new space.
It's really moving very, very quickly. Have you guys? Are you bringing tech innovation to the table? Are you bringing domain expertise? Have you got some sort of disruptive business model? How are you going to win in this space?
Oh well, at heart we're a technology company, right? So we're an SSP and a DSP, both sides of that equation. So the technology is key, and it's about unlocking what is effectively a new space, right? We didn't have these natural language interfaces at any kind of scale before ChatGPT launched, and that was only a couple of years ago. So I think it's unlocking the commercial opportunities and the conversational kind of elements of that is a brand new space, and the technology does that. I think within the company, we obviously have people with agency and kind of retail media background. We've got other, AI background, ex-Perplexity, and we've got technology background in terms of the engineers building the platform. So I think that's the kind of the melting pot of different kind of skill sets at the moment. I think as we get into different verticals, I'm sure we'll need other expertise and like trying to build out very specific solutions. But we see retail as a key vertical and key category for this, just because there's already a market for it in terms of retail media as a scaled kind of industry, segment at the moment. But also people are obviously naturally shopping for products. So in terms of an advertising opportunity, even within text-based environments, that's highly effective and a big opportunity for brands to show up in the right space.
How would you advise retailers looking to optimize here? Would you say, look, firstly, focus on making it work for your own brand and get your own brand into those conversations, which, depending on obviously the retailer, could be quite broad, yeah. Or would they be better advised to go quite narrow, possibly partner with brands and being very, very specific in what they're looking to?
It's interesting, isn't it? I think with a lot of AI, we're seeing experimentation being a first step, and that's important. But it is like, in the same way retail media has always had to be a real partnership between brands and retailers, I think this is the same. So retailers obviously need to show up in these environments, and they have specific ways to do that. If you think about things like ChatGPT apps, which is one instance, or Google has its universal shopping cart and other elements that a retailer can show up in. So I think there's definitely some experimentation. There's a good understanding of protocols and the technology layers. not everyone in a retail media team needs to understand that, but obviously some people will need to be building the actual infrastructure there. And then it's thinking strategically, like we mentioned earlier. The conversations are happening about all sorts of topics. So it's like knowing which ones of those you need to go after is important. But I think it'll always come down to a good partnership between the brands and the retailers to make it work, because brands are bringing all of that, the products themselves, but also the rich content around them and all of the description and feeding into that product feed. Whereas the retailer obviously needs to be the end point and the place where the transaction is going to happen. So as ever, it's a partnership discussion there.
But thinking about it from the point of view of the brands, and that could be, I don't know, something in the skincare world, it could be some kind of technical DIY product, could be a drinks brand. You can clearly see how discoverability is going to dramatically change for those brands. And if I'm Black & Decker, or if I'm Guinness, or if I'm L'Oreal, clearly I'm going to be very, very keen to inject my brand into those conversations. Yep. But I also need it to be bought. And I don't really care where the customer buys it, but I do want them to buy it. So how do brands kind of wrestle with closing that loop, if you like, and making sure there's a transaction?
I guess in the same way that they do now, is that if they're running that media through the retailer as a retail media buy, then clearly that retailer needs to be the endpoint for that investment and that partnership effectively. But they could also run their own marketing campaigns, and then they can either choose which retailer to send that through to, or have it go through to a consumer-led choice, so they can pick which retailer. So I think that's yet to be determined, but I think it'll be a similar kind of setup in that sense.
Putting your old Diageo hat back on and knowing what you know now, would you advise a certain route, or would you at this point be saying, look, let's just keep all options open, test and learn?
I think if CPG and FMCG brands have important relationships with retailers. They need to support those both on the trade or merchandising side, as well as with investment through retail media. So I think that's not going to change, and this will become a new off-site channel, maybe even an on-site channel, as we talked about, for the retailer. So I think it becomes part of that mix, and probably quite an important one. So I think in that sense, it's the same, but just a brand new opportunity to go after. I think what brands do themselves in LLMs is then up to them to determine. So there's going to be some of that organic discoverability that needs to improve, and all of the skill sets around that, making sure that your brands are surfacing. And then it's a decision of where they want to send the traffic through to in terms of a retailer. But maybe what they're doing in their ads is a little different. Maybe it's further up the funnel, and it's not quite as a direct sale that's happening there. They're just getting people to the site to discover more about the product, compare different products, and that might be just through to their brand site, which is still a valuable touch point in the journey.
It seems with retail media, it's stretching and challenging organizations on both sides. With retailers, they constantly wrestle with, where should this sit? Is it in marketing? Is it in buying? Is it in e-com? Yeah. Where does it sit? And similarly, within brands, you've got this. You've got the commercial teams that own the retailer relationship, typically spending big sums of money, and then retail media has really exploded in the e-com space, and so you have e-com teams, media agencies, and so they also are stretched operationally and organizationally. Is AI going to challenge that further, or does it have a sort of, not really, no, it can now sit within existing structures?
It's a good question. It's probably yet to be determined, but I would say there's probably some short-term challenges in terms of an education process that everyone needs to go to in terms of understanding that. And I'm sure different parties within the ones you just listed, some will move faster than others in terms of it being more core to their roles. But I think it's the opportunity for AI is to actually take bring those connections a bit closer and take some of the work out of that equation so that it does work more smoothly. So that's probably maybe slightly adjacent to retail media itself, but just operationally, if we start buying through agentic processes, using different new protocols and having a lot more automation in the process, then that should, in theory, take out some of the sort of the grunt work, if you like, and to leave people a little bit more time to focus on the strategy. So we'll have to see, and there's some of this infrastructure needs to be built, right? We're not in a place where it's fully worked through. And if you think about the ad formats we're seeing even, it's almost like the early days of Facebook where we had just if we think about the ad format, it's like an image, a title and a description, and it's very basic, but you can see a world where AI creatives themselves and the ad formats are going to evolve quite a bit as well. So we've yet to see kind of how all of that will unfold, but certainly an interesting space to keep tabs on.
Very much so. So, completely different topic, but we've asked several people today the same question: who's going to win the World Cup?
I've got to say England. So we're on track so far, put it that way. But there's a few rounds to go. So yeah, no, I'm rooting for England, of course, despite being in Australia for so long. So we'll see. But yeah, we've had a few good games so far. It's been a good tournament to watch.
Very good indeed. Cool. All right, Roger. Well, look, really find that very, very interesting. You've clearly done the Wayne Gretzky maneuver yet again, and thanks for sharing your thinking and your thoughts. Really appreciate it.
Great to be here. Yeah. Thanks very much. Yeah.
Cheers.